attention. Let's go.
Read the disclaimers, and please use common sense.
This is certainly uncharted territory for the channel. Up until today, It Figures has mostly focused around, well, action figures. It's in the name after all. And while I have deviated somewhat in recent episodes, and even back in the day with my tutorial on how to build LEGO arcade machines, reviewing cosplay / display / roleplay items is something that I've intentionally avoided until now. Because to put it bluntly, they don't align with what I enjoy about playing with toys. The point of roleplay items such as morphers or weapons is that, well, you're pretending to be one of the characters. To pretend you're being someone you really aren't. And as a kid with ADHD who basically felt pressured into doing that every day, well, let's just say that outside of Dungeons & Dragons, I've never really understood why people intentionally pretend to be someone they aren't. For fun, that is. Now, cosplay I can totally understand because, well, it's a lot of fun to dress up as a character that you enjoy. Hell, that's why I'm dressing up as Peppino Spaghetti for Halloween this year. And my dress-up darling also gave me a very deep appreciation for the art form. Though outside of that, I've never really had a strong impulse to cosplay anyone. With that being said, I have felt a colossal need for years now to be the owner of an OOO driver from the show Kamen Rider OOO. Mostly because that show deserves most of the credit for getting me into Kamen Rider. Now, I will confess that despite being the first season of Kamen Rider I ever watched, I haven't seen the entire thing. The honor of the first and so far only season of Kamen Rider I've seen front to back all the way through is Kamen Rider 01. But at the same time, even though that means it holds an equally special place in my heart as Kamen Rider OOO, it's not the show where I first learned that superheroes could and should have fun jingles to announce their presence. It wasn't the show that set my interest in superheroes free from its MCU prison. And it definitely wasn't the show that taught me to count the medals.
You count the medals, 1, 2, and 3, life goes on, anything goes, coming up, boom.
This, my friends, is Kamen Rider OOO, the story of the funny underpants hobo Eiji Hino, and the arm of a demonic twink named Ankh. The series follows this dorknamic duo as they fight the good fight against ridiculous monsters with equally ridiculous weapons. And ever since the day I first watched the show, I have craved a chance to own the device that enables Eiji to fight this war. However, getting my hands on the genuine article is, shall we say, a little outside of my price range right now. However, thanks to user Kylia, I'm sorry, I genuinely don't know how to pronounce this. Kylia2 on Thingiverse, I don't have to worry about that anymore, because they undertook the absolutely Herculean task of modeling each and every part I'd need to make an OOO driver, core metals, and OOO scanner. Which means that today, on my birthday, October 18th, 2025, I get to celebrate a quarter of a century of existence by saying, salutations, denizens of the internet, I'm Firebite27, and let us commence our analysis of this cosplay OOO driver by Kylia2 on Thingiverse. Since I already made a dedicated video on the subject, I won't be going over how to use a 3D printer here. All you really need to know is that it's just how I made all the parts for this item. The OOO driver prints in two parts. The first part is the metal holder, which you put the core metals into. The second is the belt buckle, which holds the metal holder. Assembly is very easy. Just line up these 3 holes on the belt buckle with these 3 pegs on the metal holder, and boom, you've assembled it. The holes will basically make this part of the toy functional by limiting how much it can turn, so yeah, that's all you really need to know about that part. Core metal assembly is just as easy with 3 parts. Have the central ring, the animal faceplate, and the back plate. The version of the central ring that I'm using has been remixed by Blue Minuet so it fits both sides correctly. The back plate goes into the shallower side of the ring while the animal goes into the deeper side. And the assembly is just as easy as sliding both plates into the ring. Boom, bada bing. Now, friction can hold these pretty well, but you can also glue them in place if they aren't holding correctly. like this. However, if you actually want to make this a functional driver, then I suggest waiting to glue them together until you have RFID chips. But I'll talk about that in a bit more depth later. The final component of the set is the OOO scanner, and this is the part that has caused me the single most frustration out of any part of this entire process. For starters, this requires you to print upwards of 5 parts. You need the holder for the RFID chip scanner, the motherboard for holding all the computer components at the bottom, the ring central to the entire scanner that holds everything together, the LED and speaker board, the cover for the LED and speaker board, 3 little caps to cover the LEDs, a speaker cover, and if that weren't sounding complicated enough already, you also need 6 screws, which I found for $2 at Menards. And you need at least 4 of them to connect the RFID scanner at the bottom to the main plate. Oh, and let's not forget about the best part of 3D printing is sanding down parts. The 3 pieces you'll need to focus on sanding the most are the central ring and the motherboard pieces for the LEDs and the chip reader. I don't really have any advice on how to go about doing that apart from grabbing some sandpaper and folding it over the edges of what parts you can get it around and then guiding it along those edges until everything fits together. If you couldn't tell from my voice alone, it is extremely tedious. And that's without getting into all the problems I caused myself with my process. If you couldn't tell from all the green poking out, I painted this all myself after printing it in green, which doesn't really matter that much until you remember that all these parts have to fit together and painting something adds a thin layer of extra material to it. This means I had to sand down items when I added layers of paint to them just so they could fit together. Not to mention that the original creator of this design had to compensate for the electronics being added by making the ring absolutely freaking enormous. One on the right is obviously the original version. It is so big that I could not comfortably hold the scanner with it installed, so I modified it into the version on the right so I could have an easier time holding it. And balancing all of that made this the single most frustrating part of the entire process. And Kelia too did not design a little holster for this thing so you can put it down and free up your hands without leaving it on the floor somewhere. I am trying to design one of my own, but it doesn't work yet. And while we're talking about goof-ups that may or may not be my fault, let's talk about how the metals fit into the belt. Now, a lot of them do fit in pretty well, like the Taka metal. Then there are some metals that I have to gently push in, like the Katatsu Muri metal I made. And then we've got metals like the Shiro Akuma metal or polar bear metal that take a lot of force to put into the driver and a lot of force to take out. So much so that they end up flying out by mistake. However, that may just be my fault for using spray paint to achieve the gold effect on the rings. And you might say that this is all a lot of work to put into something that doesn't even function like it did in the show, but I chose to leave it non-functional. Yeah, Killa 2 wasn't simply satisfied making prop replicas. No, they included spaces and holes for all the electronics too, like little nubs to attach an RFID chip reader to, cutouts to fit all the electrical components you'd need, and even a little cutout for an on-off switch, and also little spaces for screws to attach to the inside with. I mean, if that doesn't prove that this was a labor of love, I'm not sure what will. In fact, that's how I describe my entire experience with this project. When I started this project, I was only interested in printing out the metals. Of course, I did the obvious ones like the bird combo Tajador, the big cat combo Ratorata, and of course the insect combo Gatakiriba, but I also did stuff that wasn't so obvious, like the movie combo Burakawani, and non-show forms such as Shigazashi and Seishirogen. I even went so far as to create my own metal combos. Introducing Hyena, Wurufu, Coyote, Haiwolko combo, which I designed the Hyena and Coyote medals for, and Omukai, Yadokari, Katatsumuri, to create the Omu Yadoka combo using creatures that have shells on their backs. I even posted these designs on Thingiverse, at least the ones that I worked on. So if you want these medals for yourself, have at it, I guess. Although if you want to do this yourself, be warned of a few things. First off, this is going to be a massive time sink. Not to mention a money and materials sink if this is all you plan on getting a 3D printer to print. Which, if it doesn't go without saying, don't do that. But if you do plan on doing more with a 3D printer after making the OOO driver and such, then I'd say get one. Just make sure that the parts for the OOO medals are the first thing you try printing, just so you can get some practice with a 3D printer in. As for how I'd rate this set, well, I can't help but be biased towards towards this thing because it wasn't a toy, it was a project. A labor of love, as I keep putting it. Now, would my enjoyment of this probably decrease if I tried to add the electronics? I'd say so, but I can't help but look at this and be proud of how well I did. And I can't help but feel incredibly fortunate that I was given the chance to make this thing. And because of that, I am not going to give this a score. I'm going to give it a rank. And I think the rank that suits this best is a P rank.